Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. It's Paulie Esther here, and the other day Dead by Daylight ran an AMA on Reddit. If you don't know what AMA is, that stands for Ask Me Anything, in which they took questions about Dead by Daylight and they gave responses. There were about 2,500 comments in all on Reddit. I went through the whole thing, pulled out some questions to read to you. I probably missed some. There were some that I left out because the questions have now been answered since the PTB came out. So no need to put those in. I probably have some duplicates in here. Just bear with me. It was a lot to go through. King says it's probably going to take me an hour to read all this to you. We'll see how long it takes. But I did have somebody the other day express to me that they have dyslexia and they appreciated that I read the lore on my video about the new chapter, Cursed Legacy. So how could I not do this as well, knowing that there's folks like that out there. So here we go. We're going to go through this AMA together here. So let's see. AMA, Ask Me Anything. We are Behavior Interactive, the devs behind Dead by Daylight. Ask us anything. And for more than 4 years, we've been hard at work on Dead by Daylight, a horror asymmetrical multiplayer game. You can ask us almost anything. I thought this was an AMA. Well, our devs have signed non-disclosure agreements and we are following our data sharing policy. This is why our team will be unable to answer questions about business deals, future licenses, unannounced features or content, and private and personal questions about other players. While there are certain things we simply cannot legally answer, we invite you to ask away. Worst case scenario is we'll just let you know that we can't legally answer that question. Meet the team that will answer you today. We have Patricia, the community manager, Peanuts, the community manager, Devious QC, the creative director, that is Dave Richard, Cote Behavior, that's Matthew Cote, the game director, and Not Queen, the lead community manager. You're also going to see Marie-Claude Bernard in here as a public relations person, so let's get to it. We know the survivors have the campfire to hang out at when they're not in a trial. Do the killers have an area to hang out at when they are not in a trial? Are the killers able to interact with each other out of a trial? Matthew Cote, they are all alone. What horror villain or protagonist is your dream character for a killer or survivor in Dead by Daylight? Matthew Cote, there are only a few legends of horror that have not yet joined the ranks of our chapters. The list is getting short. Obviously, Pennywise and Jason have a standing invitation. So does that mean that he specifically named them? They said they weren't going to talk about business deals, that they're not in negotiations for those two characters? How are you going to add Jaws to the game, and why would he be the best killer? Not Queen. He's going to flop around on the ground, but powered by pure hatred, he will do it very fast. He is a very fast boy. That is why he would be the best. And Storm A4 comes in with this. Is the boat on the swamp big enough? Which, if you've seen Jaws, you're going to need a bigger boat. That's pretty funny. Love that. Will there ever be Danny Devito as a survivor? Dave says, never say never. And Peanut says, Dave, what have you done? With people like Mr. Envy and John Robb making very good quality chase music for each killer, is there a chance of getting new chase music soon? Peanuts. We've seen their work and it's pretty great. I can't promise that we'll be able to go back and make unique chase music for each killer, but we've given the Demogorgon its own chase music. And Not Queen says, no doubt this community has a lot of talented members and the idea of having custom chase music is really interesting, but right now it's not in our plans to change the chase music system. Are you aware of some of the killers we would want shirtless as a cosmetic? Yes, we hear you loud and clear. Shirtless clown. Thanks, Peanuts. And Crazy says nobody would be able to stop staring at such a dad bod. Will cross progression come into the game someday? In our last customer satisfaction survey, we included a list of questions about crossplay and cross progression. This is definitely something we're exploring for the future of the game. We're just starting to explore that option, so I wouldn't be able to tell how long it's going to be implemented, but I agree on the fact that it would make sense to give the players a choice. Oh, that was the choice of whether or not they wanted to be in the crossplay. When will cross-platform be going live so PC can play with Xbox One players? Will it be able to be play with friends this way? It's something we'd like to do, but we can't give an ETA just yet. Right now, crossplay is only possible between Steam and the Windows Store. Is there plans to be able to add players from a Windows Store? That is something we'd like to add going forward. What is the process for getting licenses for DLCs? Do you go and ask them? Do franchises come to you? Matthew Cote answers, some have approached us, some we have reached out to. It depends. In the end, it's always a long conversation with a lot of back and forth. More than just a business deal, these are partnerships, and we want to make sure everyone involved feels respected and treated fairly. Would you care to elaborate more on this process with a specific killer as an example? I would love to, but these are some of the most confidential things we work on. I'll have to keep that a secret for now. What is the plague saying in Hermori and in the menus? Not Queen says something very mysterious. I honestly don't even know the answer myself. And one of the fans writes back, I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that she's saying Ada Nika Dina Dianu Asamumyat during the Mori. I looked up the meaning on multiple different Akkadian language sites, and most come back with something similar to heed my verdict, drink from 100 goblets, which probably means fountains though. I'll see if I can figure out what she says in the main menu. What was the hardest chapter you worked on, and what was the easiest? Patricia says, the hardest for me, I think it was the release of Stranger Things, because it was a really big license and we wanted to make sure that our communication for hyping this chapter was on point, and it went pretty well. The easiest, I have no clue. What does it feel like to get hit by the plague's corrupt purge? Matthew writes, it stings. Also, it's strangely hot and cold at the same time, but the smell is what hits you like a ton of bricks. This is just my perception. Some people like it. Is there a chance to get a mode where you can practice alone or even against bots? I know there is KYF, but sometimes I just want to test things out by myself. Also, quick thank you for the whole DVD team. We had some discussion about it, but nothing was confirmed or decided yet, Patricia says. Personally, I think this would be a great way to test new perks and killer power, etc. When will you guys fix hitboxes, and is there any plan to balance the game around the level of communication that Survive with Friends have? Peanuts answers, for hitboxes, it's a bit of a tricky question. The hitboxes themselves are working as intended. What you're noticing is most likely latency. This has to do with how the game registers a hit. Imagine a cone-shaped area in front of the killer. If there's a survivor in this area when the killer swings, that survivor gets hit. To the killer, it'll appear perfectly normal, but for the survivor, it takes time for that information to reach you, which can make it seem like you got hit from very far away. This is something that we're working on minimizing as we migrate over to dedicated servers. As for balancing around Survive with Friends, this is also a bit tricky. If we were to balance solely around incredibly coordinated teams, we would be leaving solo players at a huge disadvantage. Our goal is to gradually bring solo players up to the same level of info as a pre-made group and then balance killers to match. This way everyone's on a level playing field. I think probably the Kindred change demonstrates that the most recently. When can I expect Tony Hawk in Dead by Daylight? Matthew Cote answers, details of the conversation I have with Mr. Hawk are confidential. I'm just so excited to type that I had a conversation with freaking Tony Hawk. That's amazing. Should we expect a survivor to come with every new killer from now on? I remember previously there were queue time problems when only one side got a new character. Matthew writes, chapters usually have one of each, but as you saw, we have had different recipes in the past and we will most likely have others in the future. We are well aware that this sometimes has an effect on queue times. Same with events or even some of the new archive objectives. We are monitoring this closely and we always take that into account. Evil Ash. What are some mechanics points of interest that have been discussed but scrapped? The flying killer, Matthew answers. As a power, it is super cool, but the way we built the environments makes that impossible. Still, can you imagine? No, I cannot imagine Jeepers Creepers just throw that idea into the fireplace and let it burn forever and ever and ever. Sorry, I got a little personal there. Will you please consider adding the cashier from Ghostface's trailer as a survivor? If this isn't a possibility, can we get a reason why? Peanuts answers, you mean Carl. Carl is wicked dead. I believe the lore-friendly answer is that he wasn't chosen by the entity before he died, at least as far as we know. Maybe someday he'll show up and surprise us all, but I can't promise it. And then Wolf Fang says, it's because supermarket cashiers lack any sort of will, hope, and emotion that the entity sustains itself on, so Carl was deemed useless by the entity. Oh, that's a rough one. Has there been a franchise that approached you guys, but you had to turn down the deal? Like a company that wanted their killer in your game, but you guys declining it? Matthew says, yes, there have been a few, and this is also confidential. Is there a possibility for a non-humanoid killer? Demogorgon was kind of close. Maybe something like this may be introduced in the future in the shape of an animal, or maybe a giant insect, like old black and white movies. Adding to this, is there a possibility with non-traditional height killer, like a leprechaun or a Chuckie-like killer? Did you ever think about adding existing survivors and killers, but with the switch role, like a killer Neca or a survivor Bing Bong Boy? Is the mobile version still yet to be released this year? And are existing community-made tier lists for survivors and killers, perks, etc., at least relatively close to actual win rates? Like, is Leatherface actually as bad as people think? Thank you so much. Hearts from Russia. Peanuts answers on the human and non-humanoid question. It says, it's possible, but it's not very likely. We would need to have a very good reason to do so. In order to make a non-humanoid killer work, you'd need a whole new set of animations. Then, of course, there's other issues, like how do you get a survivor up on the hook? If they're crawling around on all fours, how are you going to see them in a chase? There's just a whole bunch of things we'd need to figure out in order to make that work. Question 2 was switching sides. I suppose this would be up to the entity to decide, although it usually has a pretty good idea of what it wants. And then for the mobile question, I'll have to leave this up to the mobile team. They're separate from the main Dead by Daylight team. I'd suggest keeping an eye out here for any updates on Dead by Daylight's mobile Twitter account. And for tier lists, it depends on which list you look at, but usually the top few killers are pretty accurate. Beyond that, it's not as clear-cut as you might think, and most of it boils down to personal preference. What's the Trapper's favorite Pringles flavor? Oh, and this is Marie, Senior PR Manager. I texted him, but I guess I've been ghosted. I personally don't like Pringles. I prefer regular Ruffles. Console game health seems to have taken a step back since their introduction of the archives and Rift. Well, the new chapter addressed some of these issues. Peanuts answers, definitely something we're looking into. We're currently looking into an FPS issue which appeared with the mid-chapter update, and we're also looking into some quality of life changes like increased sensitivity. Optimization and game health are an ongoing process, though. We're looking to focus more on game health going forward, but that unfortunately means that we need to cut back on events. What common requests do you see in the community that have been acknowledged or that are being acknowledged now? Loads, way too many to list. We're always keeping an eye on what the community wants. Crossplay is probably the most recent example. It's been requested for a long time, and we're now starting to make it a reality. There are lots of things we'd like to do. It's more a matter of finding the time to squeeze it all in. How long do you see Dead by Daylight living before you stop updating it and adding DLCs? Marie replies, we're planning on bringing new content for DVD as long as we'll have a strong community asking for more. Will Leatherface or Freddy get any cosmetics? Matthew answers, Leatherface has a few fun options. Freddy is harder. He's pretty much always just Freddy. Any plans to improve audio for killers? A year ago, following your ears was a very reliable way to find survivors, but now it's almost like they can run straight past you and you don't even realize they're there. Patricia writes, there was an engine update in the last mid-chapter, and engine updates might have an impact on visual and sound rendering. I saw a couple threads saying that it's much harder to follow survivors in chase now, and I will definitely bring that up to the person in charge of the audio. Why was the Trapper chosen to be the face of Dead by Daylight? Matthew writes, he was the first character we created. He's also a very unique and imposing one. The Wraith would have been a possible choice too, but he's just too uncomfortable being that visible. How high is the possibility that you'll skip a chapter in order to improve the game's health? Examples would be extremely unfavorable maps for most killers due to map design, Players disconnecting are at an all-time high. A huge volume of perks are literally useless or extremely niche to see any usage. And Not Queen writes, very low. Creating new content is always going to be something we're striving for, but to answer your question, we do want to skip something to allow resources to be put on improving game health. We recently announced that we will put our events on hold for the time being to concentrate on game health. Players might think events are small additions to the game, but for a team our size, events take a lot of resources to pull off and sometimes even adds more issues to fix. This is why we want to pull resources from events to put them on improving game health. Fair. What's the most fun you've had in a match in Dead by Daylight? Patricia says, we have once a week an hour of playtest where all the devs play DBD. I remember that every time I'm playing this game, I have a lot of fun. The most fun I had is when I team up with a colleague and we try to survive the whole game. I am very loud and super intense. Ha ha ha. Enid says, I can confirm. Which killer and survivor do you think you'd personally get along with? Matthew says, I think I'd be okay with Dwight coming over for board game night at my house. I'd also like to hang out with Neca, but I'm not sure how to approach her. She's cool, but a bit hard to read. Enid says, the Wraith seems like a cool dude. He never really wanted to be a killer. He was tricked into it. And Fung would also be the obvious answer because video games and all. Will we see a Doctor rework soon? Probably not a full-on rework, no. A rework would mean a completely new power, much like Freddy. We'll be updating the Doctor with some new bells and whistles at some point soon, but I can't give an exact date yet. How long do you hope to keep supporting Dead by Daylight? I've been playing for 3 years and I'm still loving it. Yay! Thank you for staying with us for so long. Like we said in June, we're here to stay. As long as we have people like you who ask for more, we'll be there to deliver. From Marie. How does it feel being one of the top 10 streamed games on Twitch pretty consistently? Not to mention the hype that Stranger Things chapter received on YouTube as the #1 trending and announcement, and the Ghostface chapter #2 trending and announcement. Personally, I'm very happy seeing a game I've played since 2016 getting so popular. I sincerely hope the devs don't grow out of touch with its growing community and the demands that come with it, like other game developers have done in the past. Not Queen says, proud, that's how we feel. Because despite some obvious issues, we're still here, still growing, and our community is absolutely awesome. My personal experience with this team started in early 2017, and there was only 30 to 35 of us to maintain the game. It is crazy that after all this time, we're not only successful, but still growing, and that's in part because of fans like you, so thank you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how often do you boop the snoot? If you don't know what boop the snoot is when the pig is crouched in front of you, and as a survivor, you take your little finger and you go boop, boop on her nose, or you swat her nose or little snout. Boop the snoot. That's a trick question. It really depends on how often the killer allows me to boop it. I'll boop it whenever I can. That is the correct answer. Is there anything y'all wish you had done differently at launch that you can't revert now because it's far too ingrained in the core of the game now? Matthew says, there's not much we are unwilling to change if we feel it would make for a better game. Some people will remember a time before the endgame collapsed, before killers could kick generators, before tutorials, before the store. In our first year, we drastically changed the progression. Some people still remember the epic grind we had back then. If something needs to change, we will change it. Given that many games of this kind have flopped at the very beginning, did you expect all the great success this game has had since it was released back in 2016? Marie says, we certainly did not expect to be where we are today. We're growing more and more as time passes by. We consider ourselves very lucky to be here with you guys. Now that the Demogorgon is in the game and has all its unique animations, does it open up the possibility for more creature-type killers in the future, since you guys have the Demogorgon's animations to work off of? Maybe even an original creature-shaped killer? Marie says, we did make an exception to our non-human-like killers rule for the Stranger Things chapter. Does it open a door to more in the future? I guess only the entity knows. Is it difficult trying to meet the community's demand for certain cosmetics such as shirtless Myers? I assume this is due to the legal issues that come up changing a licensed killer's look. This is very interesting. Matthew writes, licensed characters for the most part have to stay an exact representation of how they look in whatever the original material is. Myers, for instance, has to be exactly as he appears in the scenes of the original movie. So it sounds like to me like their license only extends to the first Halloween movie. This dashes my hopes for mature Laurie from Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends. Perhaps they could negotiate rights for those, but it sounds like this license in particular only pertains to the original movie. Will you ever change the lighting in the lobby back to normal? I suppose it's possible, Peanut says, but the lighting was actually changed to what it is now due to popular demand. I can't speak for everyone, but I do like how there's a little more color now. Are you guys still optimizing the dedicated servers because there's still hiccups while playing the game on both the killer and survivor side? Matthew writes, yes, absolutely. There are still many improvements being worked on in our game code to accommodate the new server structure. We do know that a few elements of the game do not feel as good as they did when the killer was the server. Expect more improvements coming. Who are your favorite killers and survivors to play, and which non-licensed character was your favorite to invent or design? Peanut says, the Huntress has been my favorite to play for the past few months. It's so satisfying to hit those long-range hatchets, and it always feels like there's room for me to get better. I'm also a sucker for Nia and Dwight. And Patricia says, I really enjoy playing the Hag. I love setting the traps and scaring the poop out of survivors when they step on it. And Jane and Meg are my favorite survivors. Why isn't there an option in the in-game cosmetic store to mix and match skins for a perfect combination? Yes, I like to see the pieces before I buy anything, how they synergize together. Not Queen says, I am a fan of mix and matching, and I also see the limitations we currently have in-game for that. Mix and matching prior to purchase is a feature that is in our backlog, but I don't see any short-time plan on it, so I wouldn't get my hopes up. But you are right, we mix and matchers need that feature not so soon. Will you ever add a button that lets me kick away survivors that try to save me prematurely, causing me to be farmed by the killer? Unlikely. It's something that we actually tried and it wasn't yielding the results we wanted. That's a very interesting answer, that they tried this in game already. Have there been any talks or ideas about more emotes for communication other than point and come? Not Queen also answers, of course we discussed emotes. After testing a few of them, our creative department decided that it was breaking immersion and atmosphere, so right now additional emotes as a feature is on hold for the foreseeable future. Ah, no finger guns. Also, there's a picture about the optimization roadmap earlier this year, but besides updating engine, I haven't heard you guys talk much about the other optimization that we're supposed to be done in Chapter 12. We have communicated through multiple dev updates and status updates on optimization. Right now, we're concentrating on bug fixes for some specific FPS issues and edge cases. For example, Bloodlust and Doctor's Power creates frame drops for killers. Optimization is an ongoing process and will always be something we can improve. In Dead by Daylight, how will you handle the possible skill gap due to using a controller compared to a keyboard when possibly implementing the crossplay between platforms? What are some other things that PC can do and console can't in regards of advantages? And Fortnite has done it when their game is a bit more mechanical skill based. Peanut says it's definitely something we'll be keeping in mind if and when that happens. I obviously can't speak for everyone, but I'm not sure how much of a difference it would make. A survivor on a controller can do anything that a survivor on a mouse and keyboard can do. A guy like Brother Cope does better on a controller than I could ever do with a mouse and a keyboard. Since there's not really any fine aiming for a survivor to do, it just really comes down to preference. The only bit in my eyes that's iffy is the killer side. Since you do need to do some aiming, certain killers naturally end up being a little more tricky to play. Huntress, for example. Though since you're going up against survivors that are just as good, I can't see it being a deal breaker. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think, though. Are there any plans for us... Oh, I understand this now. I didn't understand it first. Are there any plans for us to bloody up whatever cosmetics we want? I would like to show that I'm a P3 David, but I still want to use the battle mullet and bloody shirtless David. Peanut says, not at the moment, no. With the way bloody cosmetics work, it's not as simple as slapping a bloody texture on top. Otherwise, you end up with weird seams around the places where the character's limbs line up. I feel like a bloody shirtless David would be counterproductive, though. Why would you want to take his shirt off just to cover him back up? You think crossplay between console and PC players would be a good addition to DVD? Peanut says, I can definitely see the benefits to it, namely faster matchmaking for everyone. We're exploring the idea to see what everyone thinks in our recent customer satisfaction survey. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us. I play on PlayStation 4, and at times the frame rate for both Killer and Survivor, as well as the frequency you miss easy swings as a killer, has really hampered my enjoyment. I know you had roadmapped console optimization, but can you give me any further information regarding optimizing the console experience? Thanks for your time. Peanut says, optimization is an ongoing process, not just for consoles, but for all platforms. We're also looking into a specific FPS issue that popped up with the last mid-chapter update. Don't worry, we aren't forgetting about consoles. This has been on my mind for a few weeks, and I'm working on a detailed concept. But would you agree that adding John Carpenter's The Thing as a killer in DBD, where the killer is able to mimic the look of the survivor it last interacted with, sounds like an awesome concept and something you'd like to do for a killer in the future, or a killer with that sort of power? Peanut says, it sounds like a very interesting concept on paper, but in practice, it would probably be a little finicky. If you're playing with friends, you'd be able to ask your friend, hey, is that you? Or come up with some sort of code like pointing if you're human, to completely bypass their ability. Will you be having more contests where players can design cosmetics? If you don't know about this, they had a contest where we had, I have another video on it about the Elephant Clown and the Demon Slayer Fungmin that were chosen as fan concepts for cosmetics. We'd like to focus on getting the last batch out first, but I would love to see us do it again in the future. This community is so amazingly talented that even narrowing it down to the 50 finalists was really hard to do. If these ones go well, fingers crossed that we'll get to do it again. I know that this is part of future licenses, but I'll ask anyway. Maybe we'll get an answer, but probably not. Any chance we're ever getting Jason? Matthew says, it is not impossible. Alien or Predator? Matthew says, as a pet, Alien. As a date, Predator. Do Steve and Nancy recognize Freddie, Michael, and Bubba? That's meta. Matthew says, that is a question that is way too clever. Please see me after class. The idea being that Steve and Nancy are familiar with popular horror. I mean, Max even goes to Halloween as Michael Myers, so to see Michael Myers in the fog would be something else. Is there a chance for Dead by Daylight VR someday? Patricia says, this is not in our plans for the future of DBD, but personally playing DBD in VR, my heart would not be able to handle the stress. Mine either. What was it like working with Bruce Campbell? Matthew answers, that's a checkbox in the old bucket list. Mr. Campbell was awesome, a true professional, and just as funny and cool as you could imagine. That's awesome to hear. Will Patricia go to prom with me? Marie, being very sensitive to the needs of the community as a public relations manager, send an invitation to the studio. We'll see what we can do. What is your guys' honest thoughts and opinions of the community? Not Queen answers, despite what a lot of community members claim, this community is absolutely awesome. Of course, you might run into some bad apples once in a while, but it is meant to happen when over 3 million players start the game every month. On the other hand, we have so many stories of members making new friends and even meeting their soulmates through our game. We're lucky to have an extremely involved community, so very lucky. So many talented members contribute in different ways. We have a very active fan base that creates artwork, streams our game, participates in activities, and basically love our game to pieces. I think my favorite thing with this community is that we always know what you think. Even if we don't want to always make decisions that will exactly match the ideas or feedback from the community, we normally have good reasons if we don't do it. We still listen to you every day, and every day I find new, fresh ideas coming from the community. My only gripe about this community, I would love for our members of this community to be able to debate this game over what is best for everyone without diverging to killer main or survivor main endless battle. On the plus side, we see more and more members trying to steer away from that rivalry and come up with very interesting discussion topics and constructive feedback. I would say that the more of the latter that we get, the better this community will evolve. Huzzah! Hear, hear. Cheers to that. Can we get a proper Santa suit for David? The perfect Santa suit is already in the game for the clown. A little rotten, but still perfect. Whose decision was it to make the clown's pubic hair visible through the Santa suit? Who on the art team decides that this is a good idea? Okay, I digress. I am a Nintendo Switch player, and I was wondering if there was an ETA for Freddie, Quentin, and Leatherface. Not Queen writes, no ETA yet. When and if we have one, we'll make sure to communicate it. What is your favorite killer to have worked on? Not Queen, no surprise, says The Spirit, because I voiced her and I love her lore and her power. Wah! Hello, and thank you for doing this AMA. I love the game, and you're all fantastic. Keep up the amazing work. For my question, as for the lore of the plague, she doesn't seem to be all that evil. Is there any specific reason that the entity chose her, and what is her motive for wanting to kill the survivors? Dave Richard answers, hey there, thank you for playing DBD. True, the plague doesn't come off as evil at first. Keep in mind that she goes to any extent to prove her devotion. You could say that Adaris lost her mind. When she realized her gods were not answering her prayers and that her death and horrible sickness was inevitable, she pleads one last time with intense fervor. The entity answered, and thus her devotion went fully to it. A great answer. Also, one more question from me. But I think it's been stated before, but do the killers interact with each other? Like, has there ever been a killer to see another killer outside of a trial? That's still up for discovery. There might be zones in the entity where killers interact. That said, it is known that the killers can be outside of trials in null zones where they are tormented and put into submission by the entity if needed. Killers can also end up in the void if they don't serve their purpose. Hey Matthew, I was at PAX East this year and I saw you a couple times, but it was too awkward to approach you. Are you going to be there again in February? And are you cool with me getting a picture? Thanks to the entire team for the amazing game. Not Queen answers, I can't talk for Matt about the fact that he'll be there or not, but he is very approachable dude. Don't hesitate to ask him for a picture if you see him around. What do the killers do between trials? Do they stay chilling at their realm or something? That would be a lore question. Dave, our creative director, will be the best one to answer you. No rest for the wicked. As far as what is known in the realm of the entity, the killers can be either in a trial torturing survivors, in a null zone to be tortured and put into submission by the entity, or discarded into the void if they stop serving. Hey Patricia, Kyle Gallner reached out to you guys on Twitter to give permission to use his likeness to make Quentin look more like, well, Quentin. Are there any current plans to act on this? Patricia replies, hello. Yes, Matthew answered him on Twitter, and we can't really share details regarding license stuff in DBD until it is 100% confirmed and approved. This was an interesting one. Do you plan on buffing Ghostface in the future? He seems to be used very rarely with little success. Not Queen says, the last time we checked, Ghostface had a success kill rate up to 65%. There are no plans at the moment to rework anything with Ghostface. Okay, so we know that McLean said that Freddy has the most lethal kill rate in Dead by Daylight right now. If Ghostface is at 65%, what is Freddy's kill rate? How do you feel about the toxic nature of this community that comes out in the endgame chat, and how do you plan to address it? I specifically mean when racial, homophobic, anti-Semitic slurs and the stuff like that is said. I know there's a report function, but what does that do? Not Queen says, reporting a player sends a report to our backend system. We then have a system that flags users to our dedicated team of associate community managers. They then investigate the report by accessing the chat logs and reviewing other pending reports on the reported player. After the investigation, there's 3 things that can happen. Nothing, the player will be cleared, a temporary ban following our escalation rules, or a permanent ban following our escalation rules. Sadly, at the moment, the player who reported someone in-game will not get any feedback when an action is taken on the report. That is something we'd like to implement in-game so players receive feedback on the report and can feel like they contributed to making our game a better place. Soon. They can access your chat log, so watch what you say. Not Queen as a survivor? Only if she can wah! Will the Fog Whisperers program ever take applications again? We're currently reviewing the program, and once it's ready, we'll reopen applications. I might know a couple people. When will you guys decide to work and partner up with Neca or other figure companies to make amazing action figures for the game? I'd really love to see figures. Marie says, we do have figurines coming up. Have a look at Good Smile and Gecko. So Good Smile, the people who make the Nendoroid figures, they have a Nendoroid Trapper coming up, and the Gecko is currently working on a Wraith statue. We know what they really want is Funko Pops. Give us the Funko Pops! Will you tell McLean I said hi? Done. Hotel? Trivago. I think I remember seeing something about how the DVD team now has a standard on killer add-ons: 4 uncommon, 5 uncommon, 4 common, 5 uncommon, 5 rare, 4 very rare, and 2 ultra rare. Will the Hillbilly and Cannibal be getting add-on reworks, or just ultra rares to fit the standard? Peanut says, that's the plan, yes. We'll be reviewing their add-ons at some point to make sure they have the right amount, as well as making sure that they're all fair and useful for both killers. Looking at you, Chili. Have you thought about new game modes or extra objectives? Don't want to know what it is, just if you have given it a thought. Yes, it's something the team has discussed and thought about. With the archives and the regular releases, it's just not something we're actively pursuing. I know Matthew has been mocked for saying, I think we've done a pretty good job so far, so I just want to say, I think you've done a pretty good job so far too. Not Queen says, I agree with Matt, we are doing a pretty good job so far. With killers other than Nurse, will killers other than Nurse be seeing any significant balance changes in the foreseeable future? And then specifically, can Pig expect any balance changes? And Dave replies, yes, our team monitors community feedback and data daily. Sometimes significant balance changes or mechanics reviews are needed. What is your favorite killer and why? Are you guys open to more creature killers like Demogorgon, or do you prefer more humanoid killers? What has been your favorite thing about the game and working on the game? Dave says, my favorite is the Wraith. I like his looks and bing bongs. I like cloaking and surprising. Other creatures are a possibility. DVD is a very unique project. I love how rich the universe is and can become. The mashup of all the different characters and the worlds, the chaos and emergent scenarios the gameplay creates. Is it possible we'll get a killer that made its first appearance in a video game? Not Queen says, Matthew Cote once said, nothing is impossible. Jason and Pyramid Head. You said all the killers are alone when not in a trial. Does this apply to Legion? Well, I'd like to imagine that the Legion members together when they're outside a trial. They are a group and endure everything together. Is there any discussion on coming up with actual punishment for disconnecting? It's so common and there's almost no negative side except to the people who do not DC. We do and did punish for leaving games, but as you can imagine, players who get punished for it don't come around and brag about it. At the moment, we punish players that reach over a threshold number of leaves during games, but we know our current system isn't ideal. Earlier this year, we shared some information on a timeout feature that will be coming to the game soon. This feature will prevent disconnectors to rejoin the matchmaking queue for an increasing period of time depending on how many times they disconnect. Let's see. This is more of the same. Peanuts adds, we also have a new system on the way which will handle disconnects immediately, giving someone an increasing timeout each time they leave a match. We're currently testing the detection for this new system behind the scenes on the PC version of the game. So I guess that means they know when you're DCing. Do you have any favorite killer survivor and why? Peanut says, I'm a sucker for the Huntress. Hitting long range hatchets is just so satisfying and I always feel like there's something I could get better at. Is Metal Man going to change someday? Not just protection, but everything of it. The reward is too hard to get and it's too easy to get it off it. We'd like to take things one step at a time and see how the protection hit changes affect it. Ultimately, being able to ignore a hit is huge and could completely change the course of the entire match, so it needs to be somewhat difficult to pull off. It should fit into an altruistic playstyle where you put yourself in harm's way to protect your friends, not necessarily something you can do without even trying. Good answer. What is the voice acting process for this game like? I imagine the script is just cough, scream, grunt. Also, how would one get an audition with you guys? Dave replies, most characters are voiced by team members. Our audio team selects members with a tone of voice that fits the character. They go through a normal recording process in a studio, coached by the audio team. Killers' voices are most of the time modified with special effects. And for survivors, we lock up the actors in a room and beat them until we get the right sounds. Not Queen adds, I voiced the spirit. Somewhere there was a Waluigi picture, so that I might have influenced the whole thing. But in all seriousness, our sound department is looking more for the tone and quality of the voice and how it would fit with the character's personality. Then they might add some pointers from the character's story. For Rin, she was very angry, but there was also a sadness to her, so I had to do that with screams for my recordings. For the Mori, for example, I had to be angry, and we had the Mori play in the back while I was screaming on cue to get the rhythm right. I think you did a good job. Is there any change you guys will give the cutest oinker in the game? Is there any chance you guys will give the cutest oinker in the game an add-on or rework changes? I would love to have more than 5 or 6 good add-ons. We would like to review the pigs add-ons in the future, Peanuts replies. If it were possible to get the licensing, would you ever release a Power Glove cosmetic for Freddy? Dave says, good question. The Power Glove is super fun on Freddy in the context of the movie, but it wouldn't fit the atmosphere and context of DBD. Personally, I would pass on the opportunity to play with power. What would your favorite movie killer or monster would you like to bring into Dead by Daylight next? Not Queen says, Samara from The Ring. The unnatural crawling, the TV stuff, that was terrorizing to me. It's a good choice. First off, I love your game and the latest balance changes are a step in the right direction. Cheers. I was wondering if there's any plans to expand the mobile beta. I just got a Google Pixel 4 and I have about 1,000 hours on PC, so I'm itching to try out how it runs and provide whatever help and feedback I can. Marie says, hey, thank you for your kind words. DBD Mobile is following a soft launch roadmap, opening new territories every few weeks, making sure the game is solid for the upcoming launch. We don't have a precise date to announce yet, but we'll make sure to scream it everywhere once we have one. I think it's only about 10 or 12 countries right now. I think by the end of the year it's supposed to be out, though. I'm new to the game and I'm enjoying it. Any tips? Welcome aboard. Glad to see you're enjoying yourself. I'd say just keep on playing. The first trials are brutal, but little by little they'll get easier and the victories sweeter. Thanks, Murray. What kind of magic have you guys performed here? I'm generally not very good at video games, especially multiplayer, but for some reason I do relatively well on this one. What combination of elements do you think makes it that way? Marie says, I think you just found your way. Congrats and keep playing. When the next archives drop, what characters can we expect to be in them? Why would we spoil the surprise? Guess you'll just have to wait a bit. Is there going to be more original killers in the future or original survivors? Yes and yes, we have many more of our own stories to tell. Will Matthew Cote be my friend? This is the most important question I could think of. Patricia reveals her secret. I think if you ask him nicely, and if you give him catnip, it should work. Dead Heart's kind of broken since dedicated servers. Do you know if and when it might get fixed? Patricia says, sadly, I do not have any new information except that we're working on it. This isn't a question, but thank you for putting DBD on the Xbox Game Pass. 4 of my friends and I now religiously play this game 24/7. Thank you, Heart. Patricia says, we're glad that you and your friends are having a great time. Thanks for playing our game and staying with us. It means a lot. And Peanuts adds, this isn't an answer, but thank you for the kind words. Any chance of hiding survivors before the match starts to avoid the killer's lobby dodging? Peanut says, there are no plans for this at the moment. We'd like to keep it so that the killer can see which items the survivors are bringing in and plan accordingly. But unfortunately, as you have mentioned, some people take advantage of that to dodge a lobby if they feel it might be a challenge. Fortunately, whenever the game is on dedicated servers, the killer dodging the lobby does not boot everyone back to the main menu. Instead, you'll stay in the lobby and it'll search for a new killer, with that lobby being put at the front of the queue. You can see this in effect on PC right now, where we're testing the dedicated servers. I can confirm this. I have been dodged like 3 times as a team, and we just wait for the next killer to be lined up with us, and it makes the wait so much better than if you were dodged in a regular lobby. The dedicated servers are awesome in that regard. Would you ever make Decisive Strike good again? Make it last the rest of the duration of the trial after being unhooked? Peanut says, it's currently very popular as is, so we aren't looking to make any changes to it at the moment. Making it last for the rest of the trial would bring back the issues that it used to cause, though. It's now designed to prevent or discourage tunneling rather than give you a free second chance. I think Decisive's in a pretty good spot, honestly. I find that the more that I move up in ranks, the more that I'm left on the ground, and I don't get the chance to use my Decisive Strike because you're playing against savvier killers who are higher rank. I think it's in a good spot. If you get caught playing DVD at work, do you get in trouble or do you get a promotion? That's how Matthew Cote became game director. It totally depends on the situation. For a lot of people here, playing the game and testing stuff is your work. There's also a weekly playtest where we all get together and play the game, testing out upcoming content. It isn't really frowned upon as long as you're still getting the job done. From what I understand, behaviors claim that a killer with the ability to disguise will never be implemented. If so, what's the reason? The elephant in the room would be that their power would be far too easy to counter. Say I'm playing with my buddy and I see him walking up to me on a generator and I ask him, is that you running up to me? And he says no, and I know right there that it's the killer. Or even if we don't have voice chat, we could agree that if the killer is a shapeshifter, we'd stop and crouch whenever we see another survivor. Makes sense to me. Monkey killer when? Clown's rework second ability should be a circus monkey. Patricia says, well, I don't know how to answer that, but as far as I know, no, we won't have a monkey killer. Come on, just think about how awesome it would be. Dead by Daylight, Chapter 15, Harambe's Revenge. Monkey Man says, I personally feel offended. And Patricia says, well, it was not my intention at all. Please don't hate me. There you have it. No Planet of the Apes confirmed for Dead by Daylight. Wait, those are apes, not monkey. Harambe is also not a monkey. Never mind. Are you planning on changing some of the older maps in relation to totems and god loops? Patricia says, on the long-term plan for us is to revisit all the themes and readjust the loops and the totem placement and also the other interactables placement, just like we did for Bad and Preschool, to give a more immersive experience for the players. We don't have a set schedule for the release, but we will do as much as possible when it is possible for us. Oh, so Neckler writes here, period. That's it. This is the question, period. And Peanuts replies, this is something we put a lot of thought into, but we're probably going to go with comma. All right, that's like, I know that's stupid, but me being the dad joke guy, I just had to include that one. Have you ever thought about putting Chuckie from Child's Play in the game as a chapter? Matthew answers, yes, we've thought about it, of course. He's cool, and the gameplay would be very unique. That being said, he's not on the short list. Ha! See what he did there? What is a question you want to be asked, and what is the answer? Matthew replies, what is your favorite kind of cheese? The answer, it's really hard to pick just one, but if I had to, I'd say a good smoked Gouda. Yum. And Leap Day Williams says, that's a Gouda question. All right, maybe I put more than one dad joke through here, okay? When will Adam Francis and David King date? Peanut says, one of the great things about DBD is that the characters are left fairly open to interpretation once they're in the entity's realm. I suppose if you're stuck there indefinitely, anything's possible. And just saying that, I realized that I spawned countless fan fictions. Yeah, that's another thing that people say to me, well, what do you think about the sexuality of this character? And I always said, you know, it's up to you. It's up to your interpretation. That's great that they haven't like nailed these things down and put them in certain boxes that they can be whoever you want them to be. And part of you can dress them however you want and pretend they are whoever you want. It's your game. Okay, so this was near the end. I'm glad I read through all 2,500 comments, because this was like almost at the very bottom of all of it here, where Jazzy Birds hits Dave up with like a slew of questions. Okay, so hi, I know I've annoyed Dave a lot with some of these questions on Twitter. I'm Question Turkey, by the way, but these are ones I'm genuinely interested in knowing. Heads up, it's kind of a lot. Obviously, you don't have to answer them all, but the ones you can, I know the community is dying to know. And Dave replies, okay, since it's your birthday, let me try and answer as much as I can. Maybe it'll benefit others as well. Disclaimer, most of the questions are a pass. Okay, so there was a list of 30-something questions and then another list of Dave's 30-something answers, so I had to retype it all to match the questions up with the answers rather than scroll through the whole thing and match question 1 with answer 1, etc., etc., so I've retyped it all here. Who is the youngest killer and survivor? Time works weird in the entity, so for simplicity's sake, let's say age stops when you are taken. I don't know the age of the Demogorgon, but I think that they would be the youngest. For the original killers, the Legion and the Spirit are the youngest at the moment of the taking. How old are the 3 original killers? They're in the 30 to 50 age group. Who is the most sadistic and unhinged killer? That's subjective, it really depends. I would say the Doctor. Will you ever dive more in depth with a character after the archive for them is done? Yes. Is Claudette autistic? No. Which killers do you think could be redeemed given the chance? Pass. Which are the 4 original survivors? What are the 4 original survivors like as people? How do they treat others? You'll learn that eventually. Do any killers and survivors get along? No. Can survivors run into killers outside of trials? Can they enter a killer's realm? Unknown. Do killers stay in their maps when they aren't in a trial? Depends. What is known is that they can be either in a trial, in a null space being tortured, or waiting in the void if they stop being useful. Why does the entity purge pustula petals? Why does it need to purge? Unknown. Which killer fought the entity the hardest before it agreed to kill survivors? Not sure about the most, but you can usually tell the ones that resist by the amount of bodily harm they suffer. Who is the nicest killer? Nope. Do some killers show mercy in trials by letting survivors escape sometimes? And if so, are they punished for doing so? Well, that is up to the players who are impersonating them. Are any survivors romantically involved? You decide. Are there any canon LGBT characters? You decide. Will there ever be game modes? Potentially when you add cross-platforms if you decide to. Never say never. Will there ever be a story mode? Never say never. Are you going to create more cinematics for DVD 3D animated, that is? Never say never. Have you considered a comic series to tell the stories of the characters? Yes. Who is the oldest survivor besides Bill? Ash or Ace? Do any of the killers or survivors have kids? Not that we know of. Are any of the killers or survivors married to someone in the real world? Not that we know of. What would happen if a killer escaped? Would the changes the entity made revert? Pass. If a killer were to become a survivor, how would the entity make that decision? What would make someone a better survivor than a killer? Not possible. That's not how it works. Are there any other real animals in the realm besides Maurice the horse? Burbs. What is the tastiest emotion for the entity? What feeds it the best? It feeds the same. The entity doesn't taste, nor does it think of it as eating. What is the entity's goal? It's unfathomable. Are any of the killers friends with each other, and who? Well, the Legion are friends. How do survivors ask for things from the entity like clothes and such? Do they scavenge them? Does the entity reward survivors for doing well? They don't. They find objects in the realms or through the blood web. Does the entity have any favorites? No. Will we ever meet anyone from a pocket dimension in the entity? Pass. Is the alchemist Vigo? Pass. Will we find out more about the observer? Yes. Does the huntress have a last name? Yes, but it is lost. And that's the end of this. So there you go, you made it through the entire AMA. Did it last an hour like King predicted? I have no idea, I haven't edited it yet. Hopefully it wasn't that long. But thank you for sticking through with me if you reached this point. I know the devs said they had a lot of fun doing this, and this probably will not be their last AMA that they ever do. Thank you all for watching and listening along. Have a great day. Take care of each other out there in the fog. Bye-bye.